Hi guys, this is Ryan from Lurker Paintball, and this is the DLS Paragon Core Technical Primer. First, before we get into it, I just want to go over some of the advantages of this system. It's extremely simple. It's a very, very low total number of seals that have to be maintained and have to move throughout this core to allow it to accomplish everything it needs to do. And it also has the simplest solenoid setup possible. So it just directly injects air from the pilot to behind the bolt to begin the actuation of the system. In comparison, a lot of competitive cores will actually do things like switch a spool that shuts off the dump chamber. It's doing more than one thing at the same time. All of this is very simple in comparison. It's also exceptionally gentle on paint. So we have a 3-stage bolt, and because it's fed initially just by that very small solenoid pilot, the first stage is really gentle, which I'll show you in a minute. It's exceptionally efficient. Internal testing, it's just about the most efficient thing tested, and hopefully the operation of this system will show you why that is. In addition, again, going back to the solenoid, we don't vent any air. A lot of other markers, you're venting something somewhere, just out into the world in order to make the actuation happen. That's not the case here. Every bit of air that's used in actuating goes down the barrel with the ball. We also have an exceptionally good airflow path once the flow actually gets going. And the valve closes extremely quickly. So, any gun, especially like poppet guns, the valves, when they're more efficient, it's because it's closing so fast. You'll see that we accomplish that in a little bit of a different way. And it's really one of the unique features about this hybrid poppet spool system. It's also dwell independent. So I think that's fairly common now, but this system does have that aspect as well. So we just run the dwell very high, and it will never over dwell. In addition, the way we sense the breach pressure gives it a self-compensating dynamic, which means it's very consistent, even in the case where the projectiles are not as consistent, because it's actually compensating for some of those issues, that variance in weight, that variance in sealing in the barrel. And also because of the way the components are laid out, both the mass and the direction that things move, there's minimal recoil in operation. These are the components. Again, very simple. A sleeve, which contains a bolt. This has Dye's great soft face flash sealing technology in it. A chamber. This chamber is fully balanced. So you can think of the valve member itself as being fully balanced. It doesn't do the thing where it has to sense the internal chamber pressure. It's informed by other things in the system. We call this the valve stock. At rest, it's also returned by this spring, and it has a custom front bumper here. And then there's just a simple back cap, toolless, of course. Very similar to some of the other technology that Dye has employed before. So you can see how simple the system is. This big O-ring on the valve stock, we'll talk about it a little bit as well. This is the unique clutch ring. This really enables the unique operation of this system. So at rest, what you have is very similar to some other cores. The chamber is connected to this front here. That pushes the bolt back at rest, so you can chamber a ball. That also transmits force back to the valve core. So this valve core is very solidly held back by the pneumatic bias in the system, but also the spring. So the spring, when you air it up, you're not going to have any issues with that. Also, if you kind of play with the core in your hand, you can see the snap action owing to this clutch ring here. But that doesn't really contribute strongly to dynamics. The other thing I'll point out, I'm going to leave this yellow arrow here the whole time to indicate that there is no chamber shutoff here. The valve is so fast that we don't have to, what I call stop the bleeding of the chamber in any way. We simply leave the regulator open to the chamber, just like you do in a poppet gun. Poppet guns don't shut off the chamber because the valve is really fast. Okay, so let's kick things off here. We just take our solenoid pilot and we run it right to the back of the bolt through these holes here. And what that does is it gives you kind of a soft touch stage 1. Everything's starting to move, and it's energizing this clutch ring. So as this clutch ring tries to get out through this little gap, it actually locks these two components together. So even if this ring were to wear or become slightly damaged, it's not going to extrude through this gap. It's actually going to give you a lot of friction locking into itself. So we've found that this is actually quite reliable. It's self-energizing, which is a really nice feature of using a pneumatic seal there. And what this does is all that force you're putting on the back of the bolt actually allows you to pull open the valve stalk, which is really unique compared to the way a lot of other guns actuate. And because this is fully balanced, there's just not that much resistance to pulling this valve stalk forward. Okay, so that's going to get to the point where this taper actually gets past one of these balance seals here. So let's see what happens then. What happens is the air, now instead of just being fed from the solenoid in that soft touch stage 1, we have a much bigger flow all the way to the back of the bolt here. So this bolt's going to accelerate. So this is your stage 2. And again, this is similar to how some other cores on the market work. And the difference is we don't have a dedicated bolt guide, right? The action of the bolt and the stalk actually give us this dynamic all by themselves, which is great. So this is just going to keep moving forward. Your bolt's speeding up. Your ball is already fully set in your barrel at this point, so you don't need to be quite as gentle at this point because the ball's already been positively loaded under solenoid control. So this stage is going to continue until you get to what we call the clutching point. So this rear stop back here, this rear stop engages, which means that this stalk can't move forward anymore, but you still have a lot of force on the bolt since that was what helped pull the stalk forward in the first place. And what you have is this internal ridge on the bolt actually smoothly disengages the clutch. So this clutch ring compresses a little bit and extrudes back into the groove. And it's going to release this bolt forward, and that's what's going to let the air actually come out here. So, this is a pretty critical thing. The geometry here matters, but it's been tuned so that it's a really nice, smooth releasing action. You can actually feel that when you actuate this by hand, that it catches, but then it kind of, you can think of this as a champagne cork really smoothly forward. Okay, so firing point. I'm going to point out a couple of things here. The bolt's just going to continue forward since you've still got a lot of pressure in this annular area. And then this breech pressure is going to drive the ball forward, obviously. But then you kind of have an equal and opposite reaction on the red arrow here. This valve stalk is actually going to be driven closed by the very same pressure that drives the bolt. So this is really, the core of the Paragon. This is what we call spreading action. And you can see from the yellow arrows how smooth this airflow path is, actually. So everything, there's not a lot of redirection, right? It's almost like an airfoil profile that just gives you all that energy delivered right to the ball. And then as it stagnates behind the ball, boom, it's closing your valve super fast, just like any really efficient gun needs to be. And, we have a lot of data on this, and it's just, this is a tremendous aspect. How much lift we can run in this valve. It's like running a big cam with a really big valve spring. We can get a ton of flow, but still close the valve rocket fast. And then finally, you're left with some chamber pressure in the bolt because this is sealed up again, and that's connected right to this front pneumatic sear kind of area. So the bolt just returns, and you're never going to get into trouble with this simply because the chamber was always open. So as that builds back up, you actually only the residual starts the return of the bolt. Keeps it nice and gentle, and then that's just going to eventually get us back to the original firing position, fully reset and ready to go with the whole cycle again. So hopefully you can see how much how simple and elegant the operation of this system is, and how the clutch ring actually enables that. It lets us do two things with the bolt. It pulls, and then after it releases, that air pressure just pushes back to really help us get that great valve resolution. So just some conclusions. Again, very reliable, very efficient. Internal testing on both of those things has been really encouraging. And I just wanted to briefly say, I started working on this project like 2012, 2013 area. We have a version of our assembly here on the left that's actually what's in the patent, which is now assigned to Dye. And you can actually see how much care they took to make this the embodiment that I always thought of as the Paragon. You know, that's a name that carries a lot of weight in terms of me thinking this is about as good as you can do with respect to a core from an engineering standpoint. As we were designing it, features just came out of it. As we were testing it, we were pleasantly surprised with what we could do in order to get the best performance possible. So, you know, a big part of the reason we were never able to release this as a smaller company is because all these other things that you have to do, grips and triggers and boards, it's a huge amount of time sink. But my passion was really always around the core, about how great this core could be. And so I'm super happy to see it getting out into the hands of players. And, you know, all of the accessories that Dye puts out are top notch. And being able to go into sort of the evolution of the high-end Matrix platform, which I've shot for years, is really just a great final fit for the project. So extremely excited, extremely proud, and hopefully this video helps everybody understand why, frankly, I love this engine or core so much. And I'm really excited that everyone will get a chance to try it. So thank you very much, and enjoy the Dye DLS.